This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we've got a special guest on the podcast today. His name is Joshua Broome. So he was a porn star for 6 years and performed in over 1,000 adult films. And at one point, he was even given the top award in the adult film industry as Performer of the Year. And so a lot of you guys know his story because he's not a porn star anymore. He's actually a pastor now. He went to school for biblical theology, and that's kind of what he does now. But in this particular podcast, we talk about what things from his childhood led him to go to Los Angeles to try to become famous and then end up in the pornography industry. We go over some of the misconceptions about the pornography industry, especially from consumers of that particular, form of entertainment, if you can call it such a thing. And even we talk about the different levels of depravity and things that he was pulled into. Because at one point, even after doing 1,000 different films in straight pornography, he actually transitioned into doing gay pornography. And you would think like, maybe he's bisexual, maybe he had, homosexual leanings as a kid. But the way he describes it is very, very different. So you need to stick around for that because it's incredibly interesting to look at that. But then we go into, how he considered suicide at one point, not just considered it, planned it out, and kind of how the Holy Spirit had a hand in keeping that from happening through working from through another employee at a business that he was at the time. And then we get into, how he's rebuilt his life, how he met his wife right now, kind of how they've worked through like, okay, here y'all are trying to have a healthy sexual relationship within the confines of a godly marriage with a man that had promiscuous sex all the time and a lot of times got paid to do that. And so we talked through that. And then at the end, we just kind of flowed for a little bit. We went well beyond the time we had even planned for, just because we got into what our identity is and what an actual porn problem says about you, because we think it's a porn problem, but it's not. It's a masturbation problem, but it's not just that. It's even worse than that. We have a self-medication problem, but it's even worse than that because we don't have a self-medication problem. We have a God-shaped hole in our soul that we're trying to fill with this, release of ejaculation or something like that. And so we just get into a lot of those different areas, and you can just tell this guy's just had his life completely turned upside down by God in such a great and amazing way. I will tell you again, it is an adult subject matter today. And so some of the things that are described are probably going to be a little bit too severe for some super, super young ears, but it's not an explicit interview in the way that you might think. But guys, I really, really enjoyed my time with Joshua. So without further ado, let's get into it. Joshua Broome, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Hey, glad to be here. Glad we finally made it happen.
We finally made it happen, but I do got to ask you right from the jump here, Joshua. I've seen you on other shows. I've seen you being interviewed, and you've got like this fancy studio setup. You got this cool mic. You got a cool background. Why do you hate the listeners and viewers of Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast? What did we do to you?
Hey, I know that you guys didn't need all the bells and whistles, so I wanted to just bring some more authenticity and vulnerability. So I wanted to remove myself from the comforts and just put myself into the woods. So okay. Here I am.
Well, hey, if pastoring doesn't work out for you, you might have a future in politics because you just skirted right around my question. But we're going to dig into your story. A lot of people in my audience know your story, but for those that don't, we're going to be covering a lot of ground. When I did the introduction, I kind of gave a sense of where we were going to be going today. Right. But where I wanted to start is obviously a hinge point of your story, Joshua, is when you moved out to Hollywood to make it, as it were. You went out to LA and you chased a dream like a lot of people do. And we'll get to that. But when you talk to people that ended up doing the things that you did and were at the kind of dire place that you were in, you can kind of look at their childhood and see the scars and some of the things that shaped them at that time that led to future sins, future mistakes, future lifestyle choices. So let's start with your childhood and then let's make it all the way up to Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, a lot of the people that made the decisions that I made later in my life have traumatic stories. I mean, you said that you've had Brittany on, and Brittany has just a horrible season of her life led to her making decisions that were contingent of how she saw herself and how she saw the world. But for me, not similar in that sense, but I grew up in South Carolina. The thing for me, my gap or my trauma was the fact that my mom had me when she was 16 and I didn't have a father. But my father was in close enough proximity, being in a small town in South Carolina, that I saw him on a daily basis. So growing up in this really small city, just a few thousand people, one grocery store, one gas station, one
Mm.
drugstore. So I would see him in town. And as I was young, it was confusing because I knew him to be my dad, but he never played the role of my dad in my life or in my home. So that was confusing, and that eventually led to me being frustrated and angered by that because as he got older, he gets married, has a very successful career, has other kids, and as I'm growing up, my mom's amazing, but we were struggling financially.
Mm.
So I didn't have some of the things that I saw other people having. And then these other two siblings that I have, growing up having the things that I didn't, and like financially, sure, but even more importantly, they had a dad.
Right. So there's so much there, but we'll tease that up for a little bit later. So
Yeah,
you have kind of this father shaped hole inside of your soul, and you were looking for validation in other places. And from what I know about your story, you did find validation in dating, in girls. You found validation in
yeah,
athletics, in performing well athletically. I think you played basketball, but then
yeah,
you thought you had a future and you wanted to basically go be a movie star. You make it out to Los Angeles. You do what most people do in Los Angeles, where they
yeah.
don't just walk right onto the set of the new Avengers film. They got to go
Right.
do something, bus tables, wait tables, something
Yeah.
like that. So you're doing that type of work, and then you're approached by a group of good-looking young ladies, and they pitch you on something that really led you on a crazy path. So go back to that restaurant and go back to those ladies. What happened?
Yeah, like to your point, like many people chasing their dream, I move out to Hollywood, and again, my story, tying it back to the trauma was, I was working at a really well-known place in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard. I was making $400 or $500 a night, in that restaurant, which sounds like a ton, but in Hollywood, it's not.
Yeah.
It's enough, but it's not a ton. And but I mean, I had an agent. I was doing modeling and I was doing acting. I was taking improv classes. I was doing all the things that I needed to do to move into the direction that I wanted to go. And then to your point, I'm working in this restaurant. Three women walk in, sit down at this table. I'm going to wait on them. Very attractive. I'm going to use my Southern charm.
Yeah.
Maybe get their numbers, hang out with them. Maybe get a good tip. I don't know. A lot of celebrities came in there, and then we started having this conversation. And then they pretty much, within 5 minutes, were like, "Hey, do you want to be an actor?" And I was like, "Great! This is my segue into a project, or they're going to introduce me to someone because." In that industry and pretty much any industry, the trajectory of your career moves at the speed of relationship. It's
Yeah.
not, having the right reel or having the right photos or whatever preparation that you could have, which is important. But more often than not, you meet someone that knows someone that gets you somewhere. And that's what I thought was going to happen. But they were like, no, we're talking about porn. And for me, so I'd seen porn when I was like 14, 15,
Mm.
and it was a magazine, and it made me feel some sort of way. And then as I got older, I saw it, a few videos here and there, but it was never something that I struggled with. But I do believe it impacted the life of promiscuity that I was leaving because again, I was searching for validation and I had access to things, but a good rule of thumb is just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I'm trying to fill this gap, and unfortunately, I'm using people to try to mitigate my pain, and so I was very promiscuous. But I do believe that me seeing those images and me seeing pornography and seeing people portrayed in this way, seeing women portrayed in that way, it did make me believe a lie that that's what sex looks like. And that's what, it's as easy as just walking into a room and asking for it. So they say this, and just to give you a little context, I have been exposed to it before, but never been in it. And they asked me this, and they used language that kind of broke down a barrier. They said, "Hey, do you want to meet with our agent?" And being someone that was in the entertainment industry, I was like, okay, well, that for some reason that validated at
Yeah.
least meeting the guy, because agent, agency, representation. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll meet the guy. Like, what could it hurt? And I go and meet the agent, and he asked me three questions, which were highly manipulative in retrospect. But he asked me, um, what was I doing out there? I'm sorry. He asked me, how did I grow up? What was I doing in LA? What did I hope to accomplish? And I was like, well, it's pretty much just me and my mom, and I want to be an actor and maybe do some modeling. And I guess my objective is to be famous. And it's funny that I said that, because that was somewhat true, but I think even my passion was skewed by my trauma, because I being famous wasn't really my goal. It was really, I have a desire to be creative, to impact people in a positive way. I mean, that's true today. That's still who I am. But I think under the gun, that's what I said. And he was like, great. Uh, in the porn industry, everything was shifting to parodying movies and doing these things with these big scripts and all this stuff. So he's like, acting, having an acting background is going to be advantageous for you. You're a good looking guy. If you can do it, uh, you can be as famous as you want to be. So I think I could make you the number one guy. You can make all the money. You can be famous. All these things that, like, my heart was hearing, and my mind was interpreting as well. I understand. Like, I wasn't naive to believe this is exactly what I want to do, but I did hear it through like a counterfeited lens, where it's like, this sounds somewhat like what I want. This is kind of what I want, and like, how bad could that be? I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot. Even though hearing it, and I should have thought, well, if I do this, which is, this is how you stop doing the thing you don't want to do. I feel this, but what's the cost?
There's
I want to do this, and maybe it will feel good, or maybe it seems like a good idea in the moment, but what is it going to cost me? And I did not think that through.
When, of course, Joshua, when you're at that age, you can kind of give a guy the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, maybe there's nothing there, but he was manipulating you. He knew what he was doing. He had likely done it hundreds of times before.
Sure.
Get you through the door, get your
Well,
feet.
even the girl.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was going to say, even the girls. The girls were scouting,
Right.
so
Exactly.
they were compensated for every person they got to sign a contract.
Yep, that's commission, that's prospecting, that's all the things you learn in sales. It's just a slightly different industry. So
Yeah.
you get through the door, and obviously, as I said in the introduction, you were in this industry for 6 years. You were named Performer of the Year at one point. You were known as a reliable guy. In a kind of a shady, weird world of pornography, you were like the reliable guy that would show up on set and be ready to go. But what I want to talk about, because obviously we're talking to guys in this audience, me being one of them, that I used to struggle with porn a long time ago. There's a lot of guys in the audience that are currently in that fight. Part of it is because of what we perceive porn to be and what we perceive being in the porn industry is. There are a lot of young guys that are like, oh man, that's got to be great. You're having sex with the most beautiful women every single day. This is amazing. But they're not thinking about the fact that you're on a set. Like there's a bunch of cameras around, and there's a bunch of resets, and you're having to do a bunch of different things that people don't really see with the finished product. So let's talk a little bit about what the public perceives about porn that's true, but then what the generalized public perceives about porn that is just super off the mark.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So for me, you kind of, I mean, it was still kind of old school. So for the guys in the industry, so this was, before the world of OnlyFans and all this stuff. like you had to pay your dues to get in. So what paying your dues looked like as a younger guy was what was popular is young guy, older girl, young fit guy, very large girl, and that's what you had to do. It's like I was doing scenes with women who were older than my mom, and it's like in the reason that they do that is it's not about intimacy. So if you are trying to be in that industry and you believe it's through connectivity, it's actually the opposite of that. To be successful in that industry, you have to be able to disconnect. And it becomes arbitrary. And it's just this monotonous task that you're doing that's not contingent on connection. It's you doing something so that you can get paid. And the way that you do that, you take erectile dysfunction medication. But even if you can't disconnect, it's still not going to work.
Mm.
So, so I would just say, look, you pay your dues. So number one, you're the lie is you're having relations with all these beautiful girls. Not the case, because the person doing that with the pretty girl, they had to do 100 scenes with someone else to prove that they wouldn't fail. Because here's the deal: the person holding the camera, they're footing the bill for everything, and everyone's getting paid except the guy for sure. And what I mean by, like, the girl, she shows up, she's getting paid. The director, the sound, the lighting, the location, all those things are getting paid for. But if the guy doesn't do the job, there's no product. So that guy's certainly not getting paid and he's not working again. So there's a lot of pressure. So the director's only going to hire someone that's reliable. But yeah, man, like to your point, like you get on set, there's three cameras, there's someone holding a boom over your head. There's someone holding a sea light, under your crotch. There's someone eating Doritos in the corner. It's so far removed from anything that's real connection. The probability that the girl's name, little to none. There's no eye connection whatsoever, because she's trying to get through it and you're trying to do it, and both of you, while you're connected from a physical standpoint, you're disconnected from an emotional and a mental standpoint, because that's the only way to get it done. And you have a director telling you what to do. So you're not doing what feels good. You're doing what you're being told to do,
Right.
and you're doing it for camera. So you're doing it to be seen. You're not doing it for your feelings or your benefit. So, like, yeah, to your point, it's so far removed from anything. The girl's using some kind of lubricant, the guy's using some kind of, erectile dysfunction medication, and it's about as fake as it could be, what with it still happening in a sense.
Well, and so as you're watching it, you have to disconnect. But as you just described, there's a lot of disconnection happening with everybody that's on the set. I want to talk a little bit more about that disconnection in terms of the level of depravity, because some people think, oh, if you bring up stuff like that, you're trying to shame people. But the reality is as far as I understand it, at different points of your career, you weren't just doing straight porn, you were also doing gay porn. But for
Yeah.
you, I think I've heard you describe it before, but it's been a while, to where it's like, it wasn't as if you grew up questioning your sexuality. It was a job. It was just another person. It was just another scene that you had to shoot. So talk to
Yeah.
me just about really where it went, because it's not just, hey, I had to, have sex with some bigger women, or I had to have sex with this type of thing. It was like
Yeah.
you were just a guy checking a box every single day, regardless of who it was on the other end.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people will just like do a quick Google and it's like, oh, this guy did gay porn. Like, well, the reality was is I did 6 years of straight porn. I did over 1,000 movies, and I won every award there was to win. And that messed my head up so much
Mm.
that, like, did I have a desire to do gay porn? No. Like, literally, so every day I thought about taking my life,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to do what I wanted to do. And it's wild to even like talk through this, but what made sense in my head were two things. Number one, if I do a gay scene then that would disqualify me from going back. That would burn my boat. Because back then, again, very different world. This is 10 plus years ago. If you did a gay scene, girls would not work with you. There were no crossover. So if you did a gay scene, bridge burned. No directors hiring me, no girls will work with me. So that career, the credibility that I had, the stature that I had, gone. Like completely gone. So once I do that one, it's gone. And I thought, okay, obviously very popular guy, good looking guy, the gay studios all the time. Every successful straight actor would get emails, requests. Hey, if you do one scene, we'll pay you an astronomical amount of money. And then, I got these requests all the time. And then one day, I'm thinking, whatever. And I get an email and I get this offer for this massive contract for 30 scenes. And I was like, screw it. Who cares? And then I do it, and it's so much worse than I thought. It's so much worse than I thought. And then I had to go from taking Viagra to taking Caverjack. So I'm injecting something into myself so that I have an erection, whether, I'm reading a newspaper or, whatever I'm doing. And then a lot of those studios require that because, man, it's so twisted because in that industry, you've got straight guys doing this stuff, watching straight porn in the background, trying to get through it. And it's like, talking about, like how sad is that? But that was to a point where every single day leading up to that, I was thinking about taking my life. And then I started doing those movies, and then I started making a plan to take my life. And, one day I did a scene in Atlanta. I flew back, and on the plane, I'm like, I'm gonna take my life. I got enough pain pills to do the job. I lined them up on the counter, and there was this. I had a payroll check in my pants pocket, and it was just driving me crazy. I just couldn't I just got to get this check out of my pocket. And I look at it, I'm like, well, if I'm going to take my life, then might as well have as much money as possible in the bank so it goes to my mom or whoever it's going to go to. So I go to this bank and I go to deposit the check, and normally I would either go to the ATM or the drop box because I didn't want to hand someone a check that had a memo on it that said, what the name of the movie was, which was always, something vile. But this day I didn't care. I was about to go back to my place and kill myself. So I go and I was about to go back to my place. The political correct term that we can use that'll be on social media is I was going to unalive myself.
Yeah.
And I go back to my place. And that's what I plan on doing. But I'm in the bank, slide the check across the counter, and normal transaction, and I get the receipt and I go to walk away, and this woman with glasses, brown hair, she had a little bit of gray in her hair. I can remember her face so clearly, but she looks me in the eye and says, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, is there something I can do for you?" And what she didn't know, which I believe it was the Holy Spirit working through her, but what she didn't know is I had not heard my name in about 18 months. Because as I started going through this depression, I started distancing myself from my mom, my brother, my family, my friends. Anyone that would say, "Joshua, I love you, but you're better than this. Are you okay? What's going on? Like you're not yourself. Like you could be doing something else." Anyone that challenged my life choices, and this is trthis for anyone. This is the beauty of accountability. When someone comes to you and say, "Hey, man, you're acting a little off. You're out of bounds here. You're talking to your wife in a way that I've never heard you speak to her that way. Are you okay?" And you hear these things, and you either acknowledge them to be true and you make a change, or you push that person away. And I pushed everyone away that was telling me anything other than, I was doing a good job, or I was the man, or my life's amazing. If anyone that wasn't saying that to me got pushed away, and now I make these choices, and I'm in the gay industry is completely a different industry. It's not the same directors. It's not the same people in it. So I have ostracized myself. I'm not communicating with anyone in that industry. I don't have any friends. I'm not friends with any of the directors, and I'm completely on this island. No one even calling me by my name. And I'd gotten to the point where I had allowed the people that I saw in the gym, they knew me to be this guy. They called me that name. My barber knew me to be this guy. He called me that name. No one was calling me Joshua. And in a very real way, Joshua in my life and in the real world had ceased to exist. But when she said my name, dude.
Well, so Joshua, the thing that keeps coming to mind as you're talking is the word disconnection. So early
Yeah.
in life, you had a disconnection from your father. You were working in the porn industry, but you were disconnected from what you were doing with your body. You were disconnected from your given name. You were disconnected. You were trying to disconnect yourself from your life until
Yeah.
I absolutely believe God used that bank teller to just be like, and guess what, guys? That bank teller probably heard a whisper in her ear, and
Yeah.
she got to decide whether or not she was going to act on it. And so just think about that the next time that you feel a whisper like, hey,
That's
go talk to
good,
that person,
man.
go talk to somebody else. You get to decide whether or not that you're a part of the Holy Spirit's plan. And God
Man,
used
I
her
don't
in
know
that
if you
moment.
can see that, bro.
But you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's that level of disconnection, because again, we just
Yeah.
think, oh, I just, maybe I had gas, maybe I just, like, I got that idea. But filter that whisper in your ear through the
Sure.
scriptures, through biblical understanding, and know that that's not coming from Satan. That's coming from somewhere else. And
Yeah.
so even further to keep going within your story, you get out of the pornography industry. You basically burn your bridges. You go back home. You move in with your mom. You're trying to rebuild your life. You keep running into all these people that know you as the other guy from
Yeah.
the other thing that they watched, and
Yeah.
it's a difficult time period. But as I understand it, you're working at a gym, and you see a young lady that you're attracted to, and you go into your normal mode, and you're going to
Yeah.
ask her on a date, and
Yeah.
she was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
basically shuts you down, and this is not
Yeah.
something that you're used to. You're not used to being put
Right.
in that. And she's like, no, she wanted to be disconnected from you, but y'all did eventually start going out, and pick the story up from there, because it's an interesting start to that relationship, especially compared to where you're at now.
Yeah. So to your point, this like super gorgeous girl. So I'm working in a CrossFit gym. Um, this is about 2 years after I got out of the industry. So made some strides in the right direction from the outside looking in, because I quit the industry, and then again, I was someone who was thinking of taking my life. So, was I making responsible financial decisions? No, of course not.
Yeah.
Wasn't paying my taxes quarterly. I was making astronomical amounts of money, spending a ton, living in expensive places. But I remember taxes came back around a year after the industry, because I quit like right at the end of the year. So I paid taxes, right after that. But the following year, it was not good. It was not good. So it pretty much cleaned me out. And I remember I had a Breitling by Bentley watch that I just absolutely loved, that I had to sell that to pay my taxes. And but anyway, I was working at this gym and working at a grocery store. Finally worked my way up in this gym. Made it to a place where like I'm somewhat respected. I'm one of the lead trainers in the gym, because again, that's my mentality. Like whatever I'm doing, I'm going to be the best, because I have to be, because that's how I validate myself. And so this girl, best athlete in the gym, incredible gymnast, gorgeous. I walk up to her. Hey, I'll put your weights away. I got you, babe. She's
All
like,
right.
get out of here, dude. Like, get out of here. And I was like, I'd love to grab dinner with you sometime. She's like, I think I'm okay. And then she's like, well, I'm going for a run in the morning. And it's like, me, it's like, I like to like power cleans and sprints, or push a sled. It's like run a 5K. It's like, man, that's a nightmare, but I'll do it for you. I will do it for you. So I meet her at this park to go run. And like this voice starts whispering to me, and I think it was a combination of, God trying to work on me and my mom. Don't you lie to that girl. Don't you dare lie to that girl. And what you'll find is often, like, obviously a lie to someone's face is hurtful, but sometimes it's what you don't say
Yeah, sure.
that hurts equally bad. So for me, I would withhold information until it would come out, and then I would just like, didn't deal with it. And that's how I was living my life, and I just couldn't do that with her. So I'm like, hey, before the run started, we were walking. I was like, hey, I I did a little bit of porn. She's like, what? What'd you say? And I was like, all right, man up, tell her the whole truth. And I did. I told her everything, and she was pretty shocked by what I said. And then, she looks at me, kind of, puts her foot down, says, well, a person's not defined by the worst thing they've ever done. And a person's not defined by the greatest thing they'll ever accomplish either. God defines a person. You don't get to define yourself. Do you know who God is? And for me, I'd gotten very good at, pretending to be whoever I thought the person across from me wanted me to be, because I didn't know who I was.
Right.
But I was great at putting on that first date mask, and I'm going to become whoever you want me to be. So I was trying to sell her on, like, yeah, I believe in this and that. And like, yeah, I know God. And she's like, well, what's your relationship with Jesus like? Are you part of a community? And just asking me a few questions that quickly disqualified me from whatever I thought I knew.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I've been following Jesus since I was in the 7th grade. My whole family's Christian, and I'm not perfect by any means, but my relationship with Jesus is the foundation of how I live my life. And then she, quickly transitioned into, okay, what kind of food do you like? What's your hopes and dreams? I'm like,
What?
what? Wait, I just told you that, and you want to know if I like tacos?
Yeah.
Like, what? It just blew my mind. And in a very real way, it's like the way that she responded to me, it created this curiosity. It's like, man, if what is in her is causing her to be able to respond like that, I want to know more. A really great, representation, like Colossians 4:6, talking about your speech being gracious and seasoned with salt, so you might know how you ought to answer each person. And sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you don't say or how you say it.
Sure.
And we text like maniacs for a week, and then she invites me to church, and then I go into church, and again I'm thinking, I'm curious, but I'm probably gonna catch on fire if I walk in here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any business here. And they had this big wooden plaque when you walk in the door, and it said, we want to love people where they are and encourage them to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was like, Jesus, I know a little bit about him. He sounds cool, but if you knew where I was,
Right.
no way. No way. And, again, I grew up in a very small, independent Southern Baptist church. And what I knew was that if you had a wrinkle in your shirt or a tattoo on your arm, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I knew. And this guy gets up in a t-shirt and jeans and cowboy boots, and he sounds like my grandpa. And he's talking about his relationship with Jesus. And he starts telling the story about Jonathan and David, and how when David took over as king, when Jonathan died, historically the previous kingdom was wiped out. They would make sure that every person that was still alive that was attached to the previous kingdom was killed, because they didn't want them to think they had access to this new kingdom. And David was different. And David actually asked, hey, this is from 1 Samuel, but David asked, is there anyone left out of Jonathan's lineage? And they're like, yeah, Mephibosheth. And they go and find him. And Mephibosheth knew history because it was important. And what it meant historically was that he was deserving of death. And David sent a guard to go find him. And David's guard extended a hand instead of a spear and brought him back into David's kingdom, and David gave him a seat and even restored his land. And then the pastor pivots and he's like, you know what? Romans 3:23 says that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So who's guilty? Everybody. And then Romans 6:23 says the wages of sin is death. So if we're all guilty and the cost of that sin is death, meaning eternal separation from a holy and perfect God, what are we to do? So we're all guilty and we're all separated from God, And it's like, well, I'm like, well, I was like, man, maybe I'm not the only bad person here. I guess
Yeah.
everyone, you know.
Yeah.
And then he starts talking about how Jesus, being fully God and fully man, came into this world, lived a perfect life, and then with joy set before him, was humiliated and just tortured and beaten and died on the cross willingly to pay the sin for all people, for all time that will put their faith in him. And he didn't stay dead. On the third day, he rose, defeating hell, death, sin, the grave. And he's seated. He's not standing. He's seated at the right hand of God because it's done. And that is available to you. That forgiveness, that reconciliation, that standing with God is available to you, not because you deserve it, not because you're special, not because you're good, because you're loved by Jesus so much that he was willing to die for you. And if you put your faith in him, that changes everything. The bridge that you need to get to God, you cannot build. You can't be tough enough. You can't be strong enough. You can't give away enough money. You can't walk enough old ladies across the street. There's nothing good that you could ever do to make you perfect. Only Jesus was perfect. And not because of you, because of him, you can be saved. And I heard that message and I gave my life to Jesus. And there was a lot of snot, a lot of tears. Um, uh, and I felt, man, this weight come off of me that day. And it wasn't the porn. It was the burden I've been carrying my entire life, believing that I wasn't deserving of anything. And I wasn't any good and I was inadequate. And I was like, man, we all are. But we all are equally loved so much that Jesus died for me.
And that's the message of the gospel. That's the message to everybody listening to this is there are varying levels of depravity, but every level of depravity separates you from God. And so
Yeah.
we need the payment for our sins. And the only way to get that is through Jesus. And so we're running a little short on time. So just to bring everybody up to speed, you ended up marrying that lovely gal from the gym that took you on the run and took you to church. I believe y'all have 3 kiddos now. You got a 4th on the way.
Yep.
There is a question though that I don't intend for it to be voyeuristic, but I know that there are guys in my audience that are probably struggling with this, and gals that are in my audience that are struggling with this. Because if you've heard from different counselors or different things, when a man has looked at porn and has been caught by his wife, what she's constantly thinking about is, oh my gosh, now he's going to compare me to all these beautiful, perfect women. My curiosity for you and for her is, and from the first time I heard your story, I was like, how does she cope with the fact that you did over 1,000 straight scenes with other women? And like, because she obviously seems like a very self-confident, very strong young lady, very strong faith, but man, your brain can really take you to some dark places. How have y'all kind of worked through that as a couple? And I don't just mean that relationally, but also sexually.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, so for us, it's never been an issue because for her, she believes the Bible to be true. And if 2 Corinthians 5:17 says that person that I used to be is dead and gone, and now I'm a new creation, either that is true or it's not.
Right.
So for her, why would I let something that had nothing to do with me, that a dead person did, that I have nothing to do with, impact me today? So no, Satan, you don't get to steal my joy. No, Satan, you don't get to be in my marriage. No, Satan, you don't get to have any authority in my life. So is it true that I did those things? Yes. Do they have any impact on my life? No.
I think that's a healthy way of looking at it, because I think there's a lot of cultural Christianity. There's a lot of country music Christianity in this world, to where it's just like, God's that man upstairs and I'm going to find him in nature. And, I know these verses and I'm going to put them on a t-shirt or a coffee cup, but it's like, yeah, you read them, but you don't believe them. But that
Yeah.
is true. The old has passed away, and there is a new life before you. So
Yeah.
that's a really healthy place for her and for you both to
Yeah.
be. I know we're running short on time, so I guess we'll make
Yeah.
this the last question of the day. But you don't just become a Christian. You don't just kind of turn
Sure.
your life around and
Yeah.
marry the girl and happy ending.
Yeah.
You go and get a degree in biblical theology, and you are going to use your former self, your former life, your former depravity and actions to
Yeah.
assist other people and to not only try to lead them to Christ, because you don't
Yeah.
have a porn problem, you have a sin problem. You don't have a
Yeah.
masturbation problem, you've got a sin problem. It goes way deeper than just acting out in a way that makes you feel good. So talk to
Yeah.
me a little bit about the work that you're doing now, the ministry that you have, and how you're helping people.
Yeah, I want to extend what I said that our time would be together, just because I want to say a few things and I think they're really important.
Yeah.
So number one, um, other people's opinions and words can only impact you emotionally if you give them access to. That person that's on the other side of the screen that's commenting something about you,
Mm.
they know 1% of your life. And why would you allow someone you would never ask advice from to impact you emotionally?
Right. Don't take
Like, why?
advice from people, or don't take critique from someone you wouldn't take advice from. Yep, all the
Yeah,
time.
like why would you do that? But it's just true. I mean, so either, because at the end of the day, like to your point, like we don't have a porn problem, we have an identity problem. And if
Yep.
your identity is contingent on your feelings and your action, we're all screwed. Like that is not who you are. The author of life has designed you. There's interesting there's integral things about your life that have been designed by a designer that are absolutely true about you. And you might feel a certain way, or someone that you respect might say something, or you might read something that impacts you, but if it doesn't line up with the author of life and what he says about you, you have to reject that as a lie.
Mm.
That's why, like First Corinthians 4:7, I believe it is, uh, talking about you have to take every thought captive. You have to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So how do you do that? Well, you got to renew your minds. It's Romans 12:2. Romans 12:2 talks about how we're either being conformed by the world or we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind.
Well, Joshua,
We
let me hop in there, because that's the exact point. I think it's 2 Corinthians 10:5 is like, take every thought
10:5,
captive.
yeah.
Yeah, take every
Yeah.
thought captive and make it accountable to Christ. The reason why I know that scripture is because when I was struggling to get over my porn and masturbation problem, that this is going to be a little crass, but here we are 45 minutes into this. But that was my make my boner run away scripture, because it
Yeah.
was like, hey, all these thoughts I'm having right now, and I'm
Yeah.
lonely, and I'm bored, and I just
Yes.
want to do this.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Those thoughts are not mine. Like, those
Yeah.
thoughts were placed there, and I need
Yeah.
to gather up those thoughts, put them in a little baggie, and make them accountable to Christ. And if I do that, then I will not act out in the way, and I will not try to find my identity. I will not try to find my self-medication or my release in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you made a really great point, because again, like porn is problematic, but porn is not your problem.
Right.
Your problem, like porn is the medication for your actual problem. So if I could go back in time, this porn agent says, I can do all these things for you. Why would I say yes to something that's a counterfeit version of what I want?
Right.
So if I want to watch porn, I genuinely would want to watch it. But if I stopped and asked myself, okay, what am I actually feeling? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I frustrated? Am I bored? Okay, these things are true, but I don't have to let them take me to this other place. Maybe I need to think about, why am I feeling this way? And that's a tough thing to do.
Right.
That's a tough thing to do, men and women. It's a tough thing to do. What is prompting this feeling? Is there an underlying issue? There always is. And when you get to the root, you get to the source of the problem. It's not porn, it's the root. And the root is something that happened to you, something that you did, something that's not confessed, something that, you don't have to get on a, social media platform and tell everyone, but maybe tell someone you trust
Right.
something that happened to you, or something that you went through, or something that you did that you feel embarrassed about, and process those things, because often when it's in your head and then it comes out of your mouth, man, there's so much freedom in that.
Well, and Joshua, like we are obsessed in our modern culture with univariate analysis. Oh, this thing is happening. And so we do the top line of research and say, well, that's got to be the problem. But it goes so
Yeah,
many lines deeper, because you just mentioned going back to that conversation with that agent, and he was
yeah,
providing you with things that you thought you wanted. But if we can go all the way back to your childhood,
yeah,
and if you had found identity as Joshua Broome, the son
yeah,
of blank,
yeah,
and if you had found your identity in that, you're not
yeah,
in LA. You're not in
yeah,
that restaurant. You're not with those
yeah,
girls. You're not with the producer, and then on and on and so forth. Now, you're probably not with your wife. You're probably not with your kids. But anyway, we're not going to extrapolate this out to, a completely different universe here. But again, it
yeah,
goes back to your earthly father did not show you who you were. And so you
yeah,
were almost blockaded from the
yeah.
heavenly father, because who wants a heavenly version of this crappy worldly version? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the same time, I think like the way that you see yourself and the way that you see the world is often through the lens of your trauma, or the lens of your sin, or the lens of your lack. Because you'll see, well, I can't do this. Because for me, like part of me wanting to take my life was I would never be a dad. I'll never be a husband. Like, sure, I could get a girl pregnant. Sure, I could marry someone, but I would never have those things in the way that I hope for them to be long ago. And then I was like, man, I'll never be able to be creative in a way that impacts people in a positive way. No organization will ever take me seriously. Yet I find myself again, because I did the work. Like I didn't step out of the industry and step onto, a stage and start preaching. I did an internship for about 4 years. I spent, 15 to 20 hours a week with someone mentoring me, teaching me how to read the Bible in proper context. I go and I study the Bible at Liberty University. I do all this stuff. And this has been an 8-year journey where I'm learning more about myself and I'm learning more about the word each and every day. And it's like, man, if you want to do something that is in your heart, pursue it. And if it lines up with God, guess what? There's actually gifts and talents and abilities, and there's provision, and there's going to be an anointing on what you're doing, because guess what? God made you to do it. The fact that you're on this planet is for a reason. There's purpose for you to step into, but often we're afraid of it because it doesn't line up with what I think I can do. And it's distorted and diminished by what people say, or what I've done, or what I've heard, and I don't step into it. So yeah, I mean, be strong and courageous in that, not who you believe you are and what you believe you can do, but what has been done on your behalf and what you have access to because who Jesus is.
Well, and Joshua, everyone's read that, self-help book, and or maybe they watch some dork on Instagram that thinks he's an influencer, and they talk about your mindset, and you got to be able to solve these problems. You got to, communicate to yourself
Yeah,
positive vibes and meditation and blah blah blah
yeah,
and all that. It's about whose are you? Not
yeah,
who do you think you are? What qualities
yeah,
do you think you have? It's whose are you? Are you
yeah,
Satan's or are you God's? Because if you think you are Satan's, you will go those directions. And you mentioned
yeah,
counterfeits a little bit ago. The best counterfeiter on the planet is Satan, because
yeah,
he's going to tell you that, oh, jerking off with your pants around your ankles is just like the real thing. You don't need to go ask
yeah,
that girl out. You don't need to do any of those different things. It's fine. It's good enough. Or it's just another drink. What's it going to hurt? It's just
yeah,
another line. What's it going to hurt? And again, it goes back to whose are you? And
yeah,
whose hand is going to be protecting you, because
yeah,
Satan's hand is a false hand. It looks
yeah,
like it's strong, but it's vapid. It's nothing. It's worthless.
yeah,
Whereas the hand of God is something that can not only hold you up, but it can sustain you
yeah,
through those moments where you are as far down as you think you could possibly go. It's a different
yeah.
thing entirely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and just to for me, just thinking about counterfeits, like, and for me, I associate that with a bank teller, because a bank teller
Mm-hmm.
is able to identify counterfeits, not by examining everything that's fake.
Yep.
They become very familiar with what is real and what is trustworthy. And that's the beauty, like where Romans 12:2 ties in.
And that's exactly it. You hear that all the time. It's like you don't become experts on the thousands of counterfeits. You become an expert on the real thing to where you can identify it, where it's just like going back to the bank teller, that whisper that she heard. She probably didn't have a long theological discussion with herself later that day where she kind of broke down whatever she felt like God was telling her. Like, that's probably not what happened. But the whisper came, and she got to decide whether or not to act and who that whisper came from. And so another encouragement I want to give to people, because sometimes, Joshua, when you say like, you don't have a porn problem, you got a soul problem or something like that. The answer is true, right? That is the right answer, because it's not a porn problem. It's not a masturbation problem. It's not a self-medication problem. It's a God-shaped hole in your soul that you got to fill, and you're trying to fill it up with ejaculate. But in this exact example that we're talking about, I don't want people to hear the wrong thing. Like, hey,
you still do have a habitual problem.
Right. And so that doesn't mean, okay, I don't need Covenant Eyes anymore. I don't need this software anymore. I don't need accountability partners. I don't need any of that. But I will tell you, if you're using that as a mask, you will be found out. If you have Covenant Eyes on your computer so your wife will get off your back, that's going to be a problem for you in the long run. Because here's the deal. You know how to get around your filters. You're smart enough to do that. You also know how to get around your accountability partners, and you know how to lie, or lie by omission, by not telling them the full truth. And so at the end of the day, you have to go those several layers deep and do that hard soul level work of why is this happening right now? But there are great things out there that can assist with getting rid of those habits that you've created, because those are hard to break as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So for me, it's like, I don't think you can't be disciplined until you become self-aware. So I have to be self-aware first. And then that comes from me saying, okay, pornography is problematic to me in my life, and it's hurting me and hurting those around me. It's detrimental to my heart, my brain, and how I interact with the world. And then next, I need to take inventory of my life. What am I allowing into my life? Who's speaking into my life? What am I watching? What am I listening to? Because my input often determines my output. So I need to take inventory of what I'm bringing in. And to your point, there has to be boundaries. I tell my kids not to touch hot things because I want to protect them.
Right.
And you think about like John 14:15. If you love me, you obey my commandments. It's not do what I say or I'm going to spite you. Trust what I'm saying because it's best for you. If you understand the character of God, you'll understand the tone of God, and what He's trying to do is lead you into a better way. So if he does that for you, we're image bearers of Him, so we're to replicate that. So we need boundaries in our own life to protect us from ourselves, and that looks like accountability partners, safety software, and then also be willing to ask yourself tough questions.
Yep.
It's like, why do I feel like this? Because the emotion that you're feeling is not sinful. It's what you do with the emotion.
Yeah, it's the acting out that people don't really, because they want to associate the action with who they are as a person, but then they don't want to associate it with something deeper. But yeah, when you have those conversations with yourself, that's hard work, fellas. That's some call you on the carpet thing. That's why you need a foxhole of guys around you that you can go to. You perhaps need to work through that with a trusted counselor or a pastor, someone that can actually step through.
Yeah, so I mean, that's part of my story. It's like I did counseling for over a year, and again, the maybe not my favorite book I've ever read, but definitely it's in the top 10. But it's definitely the most impactful book that I've ever read, and I read it often. Eugene Peterson's "Long Obedience in the Same Direction." Like that's the source of winning in any area of your life, because what you need is obedience and discipline. Not for a short period, but for the long haul. And if I can be obedient and be disciplined for a long time, guess what? I'll start moving in a direction, and I'll continue moving in that direction. Because if I'm 5 degrees off and I'm going from New York to Los Angeles, I'm going to end up in Seattle.
And that's the absolute truth. Again, guys, I say it all the time. What do I say it for? My example is working out. There's nothing that has more diminishing returns than exercising. The reason is because if you do it once It doesn't cover you for the rest of the year. It doesn't cover you for the rest of the quarter, the rest of the month, the rest of the week. It's something that you have to constantly do, but it is that obedience in one direction constantly. And it doesn't matter what the modality is, it's the action that you're doing. And the same applies to your spiritual life, sexual life, everything else. But Joshua, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I really appreciate your time today, but that's all from me. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, I mean, I just want you to know, like, first and foremost, man, if you're watching this and you are struggling with sexual sin, or if you watch pornography 30 minutes before you turn this podcast on, there is no condemnation, right? There's no shame, there's no guilt, right? Because if you're in Christ, Romans 8:1 says, therefore there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, but there is conviction. And conviction is from the Holy Spirit. And that conviction is you understand, you feel this prompting that, hey, the direction that I'm moving, what I'm thinking, I saw this on Instagram and then I'm going to go in this direction. You have the choice not to do that. So be like Joseph, not like David. David, he looked again. He did something he shouldn't have done. Instead of clearing his browser history, he killed Uriah. We don't want to do that. We want to be like Joseph. Joseph, he had this interaction with Potiphar's wife, and he didn't stick around and man up. He fled. So when you feel like you're going to do something you don't want to do, or you're in a situation where something is moving in a direction you don't want to go, get out of there. Close the computer. Stop the conversation. Get out of there. Go take a walk. Go hit the gym. Call someone. Do something else. Don't try to man up, because what you'll find is you'll end up flat on your face, and you'll end up doing something you never would have done if you would have just removed yourself from that situation. So that's my advice. That's the way to win, and just do that for a long time. And if you're struggling with pornography, man, that urge might not ever go away. Like, those thoughts might not ever completely dissipate, but I do promise you this: the more that you say no, the easier it will be to say no. And it's like two dogs in the fight. Whichever one you feed is going to be the strongest, and it's going to pull you in that direction. So the more that you do the right thing, and the more you say no to the thing you don't want to do, even if that desire that Paul talks about in Romans 7, why do I do the things that I don't want to do? That desire might still be there, but it's going to be easier to make the right decision. And the more you make the right decision, it's going to get easier and easier and easier. You just got to keep doing the right thing.
I was going to hit my outro, but I do want to follow up on something you said, because that's exactly right. Because some people, whenever they accept Christ, or when Christ, snatches them, whichever your status of theology is, their propensity for whatever self-medication goes out the window. Right. So they don't want to look at porn anymore. They don't want to do drugs anymore. They don't want to have sex with random strangers anymore. They don't want to drink alcohol anymore. But then there's everybody else. So like me, I don't watch porn anymore, but I feel the pull. I feel the tug towards that every day, because that's the world that we're in. Every time you open up any app on your phone, you are one click away from hardcore pornography, even if you're watching YouTube videos. But it is that pre-decision I talk about all the time. You have to pre-decide, I am not a man that looks at pornography. Okay. Yeah. Because guess what? And even more pre-decide, I'm not a man that masturbates. And you're not going to watch porn unless you need a masturbatory aid. And so it's about that pre-decision. It's about having the right modalities in place. So I absolutely love it. That was a great place. I kind of stole a little bit of your fire from the end there, but you look okay. You didn't pull out your fancy microphone for today, so it's okay. I kind of got back at you at the end. But Joshua Broome, thank you so much for coming on Undaunted.Life, a Man's podcast.
Absolutely.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my time with Joshua Broome. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So I've got 3 links for you today. I've got a link to Joshua's website. I've got a link to his Instagram, and then also a link to his video that he did with I Am Second. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@undaunted.life. That's info@undaunted.life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.undaunted.life. Also, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.